Hello and welcome to the Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Ricky Locke, professional speaker, magician and confidence coach, and quite simply, Unlocked is a journal of self-improvement. I'm talking to the experts, authors and successful people from around the world, as well as sharing my mishaps and magical adventures in my own life too, to unlock the best version of ourselves. My aim is to give you some insight and inspiration so you can unlock the best version of yourself too. Now, if this sounds like your cup of tea, then hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of my latest episodes released every Wednesday. Now, relax and enjoy the show. Well, welcome to this week's episode. This week, the brilliant Tom White, owner of Kellenva Coaching, joins me for a conversation all about what is NLP and how can it help. Tom is a qualified and experienced personal development and leadership coach, L&D consultant and NLP master coach and master's psychology graduate. Having left the John Lewis Partnership after 18 years, he founded Kellenva Coaching to realise his dream of working with coaching clients on a full-time basis. Now, in this episode, you're going to hear all about Tom's story of leaving his corporate career to pursue his dreams, but also a really great taster into what NLP is and how can it help you. Now, many of the listeners will know that I have a foundation skills diploma in NLP, and I'm currently studying my practitioner level. So Tom, obviously, he was a great guest to get on the show to share why NLP can help us unlock the best version of ourselves. Many listeners will have listened to previous episodes where I talked a little bit about NLP presuppositions, such as the episode that there is no such thing as failure, there are only outcomes. But in this episode, we discuss many of the practicalities of NLP, such as how to rewrite limiting beliefs, how to make better choices, how to build rapport, and more. But it's a really great introduction into NLP, and if you head to the link in the description, you can download a copy of Tom's free workbook, Explore Your Purpose in 7 Steps. Just head to the link in the description and you can download now. It's a fantastic episode, and enjoy the episode with Tom White. Hello and welcome to this week's episode. This week I am joined by Tom White, owner of Kellenva Coaching. Hi Tom, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks Ricky. Thank you ever so much for asking me to come along on the podcast. Very much looking forward to being here.
It is a pleasure, and apologies Tom, as we are both well aware, last week as scheduled, had a chest infection and this didn't go to plan. So Tom has been very kind and very patient waiting for me. So thank you very much, mate. Really appreciate that. But yeah, tell us, how's things been? Are you okay? You well?
Yes, yeah. I am busy as always, and I'm sure loads of people say that about being busy, but I am genuinely very busy at the moment, balancing the rigors of business with the rigors of study at the same time as well. So just trying to get the balance right. I think I've probably been back at work a few weeks since Christmas, and it's been pretty full on since. But I am doing well with it.
Good. And if you're listening to this and not watching any of the snippets of the audiogram clips, Tom has the biggest smile ever. So he is probably one of the nicest men I've ever met and has the most awesome beard I've ever seen. So we will get a picture of this on the audiogram if you can't see this. But yeah, Tom, welcome to the show. There's a reason why I wanted to chat to you. We kicked off really well last year when you did a talk in one of the business networking groups for Nottinghamshire. And one of the things that I wanted to chat to you about was that your journey is very similar to me in terms of an ex-corporate world, now finding a bit of your purpose and doing something a little bit different. And I think that a lot of that conversation as well was about NLP, which I'm currently studying a foundation diploma about, and it is one of the most successful personal development tools in the world. And because this podcast is all about unlocking success and being the best version of yourself, it just felt right we had to have this conversation. So firstly, let's just explain to the listeners, what is it that you do?
So, what is it that I do? So there are a few different things in there, but my chief preoccupation is running my coaching business, Kellenva Coaching. So that is a small coaching business. It's coming up for its year's anniversary in April this year. Which I'm looking forward to, because going to be a big celebration and everything for that. But yeah, that's my main occupation. So that's a private one-to-one coaching business. I do have some figures and some pies and doing some corporate work as well, but chiefly I do work one-to-one with private clients. And the area of interest I have in coaching, and the area I specialize in, is helping people understand what their purpose is. And whether that's purpose in life and, you know, more holistically, or whether it's purpose within career or some other specific context, that's essentially the work that I find myself doing with those clients. And they tend to be the people that are drawn towards me, people who are thinking about what is it I'm doing with my life? I've been doing this for X amount of time, and is that really what I want to do for the rest of my career or the rest of my life, or is there something else that I'd like to do? So those are the sorts of people that I find myself working with, and I have a wonderful time talking to people about purpose.
You will see lots of like light bulb moments flicker on, going, oh, wow, this is what's meant to be. And a question that I've often asked myself over the last couple of years is this it? You know, that question of, am I really doing what I'm put here to do? And what do I need to do? So we're going to deep dive into that, because I love the idea of purpose, and it was a lot of the stuff that I used to train as well. So I'm really looking forward to bouncing some ideas between you there. But I know that this wasn't always the point. You had a corporate background. So tell us a little bit about the corporate background and how you've now got into this, because it's not really a kind of different path, is it? It's very linked sideways to what you was doing. But I'd be interested to talk about what happened, and then what was that spark that got you to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I did start a corporate career. It's got to be getting on for 20 years ago now, and I was working in an organization, and I was a junior manager, got taken on originally as an assistant manager, brand new to management, never really worked with people before, and I did enjoy it, but I found that the work that I was doing was much more around the performance of the business. It was around the pounds, the pence, the sales, the wastage. And I have to be honest, I just never really got excited about that sort of stuff. You know, some people would often market themselves as being a real trader, and I just wasn't. I never really sat that comfortably with that. But the bit about it I did love was the people. And working with people, people developing their talent, developing their potential. And I really, really enjoyed that part. So I think probably about 4 years into my journey, I'd moved around a little bit. I'd moved up a little bit on the kind of the echelons of command, as it were. I'd moved into a more senior management role. And then the opportunity came up to go on secondment for a couple of years to a training role. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I've done training as part of my role in my organization. I like developing people. I've got the skills in terms of the technical knowledge. Maybe I'll do that, see what that's about. So I went through the interview process, the assessment process, and was lucky enough to be given a 2-year secondment in a technical training role, rolling out a new piece of technology across the entire business for 2 years as part of a group of 20 people. And I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. Traveling, staying away, and, you know, bearing in mind, this is when I was in my sort of early to mid 20s, and it was staying away from home, it was staying in hotels, it was traveling, living out of a suitcase. It sounded so glamorous at the time, and I look back at it and think, goodness, how did you do that for so long? But it was awesome. And the best bit about it, I was meeting new people constantly. I was imparting some new skills on them, some new knowledge. I was developing their skills. I was allaying their fears. Because the technology we were replacing was pretty old. People had got very, very used to it, very comfortable with it, and we're introducing something brand new and whizzy, which would make their lives easier, but also could be a little bit scary getting into that new technology. So I did that for a couple of years, and I thought, that's awesome. This is definitely something I want to continue doing. And I was lucky enough after that 2-year secondment to be offered another secondment to go do some customer service training for a year. So I thought, okay, so still in training, different modality. Let's do customer service. Let's have a crack at that. And I got the same joy and thrill out of developing people's skills, albeit in a different area. And then after that, I was lucky enough to be offered another secondment, moving into a different training role, and this time it was working in hospitality. So this is now combining food, which I absolutely love, and developing skills, which I developed this love for over the past 3 years. And eventually those secondments stopped being secondments, and they turned into permanent roles. And that's when I started thinking, okay, there's a real career in this for me. This is definitely something I want to do. I will accept that permanent role. I will relinquish my previous roles, and I will go forward. But what's really interesting, I think, when I look back at some of those some of those early roles that I had when I was training. And I'm very clear that they were training. They were, this is how to do something. This is the standard we need to meet. This is how it's done. It was very black and white. There was no wiggle room in there. You know, it was, this is how you operate this particular piece of technology. This is how you make this particular sandwich. This is how you make a cup of coffee, and so on. There was no in between. Like I say, it's just black and white, yes or no. But what I started to really develop a love for when I got introduced to it was leadership and management development, where suddenly it's not necessarily a right or wrong way of doing it. It's like, how do you want to do it? What's the best fit for you? And suddenly you're operating in that gray area. And that's where this light bulb really, really flicked on for me, that I actually quite like operating in the gray. And the reason that's so ironic is because when I first started on my training career, it was all about, I love the fact it's black and white. There's no room for argument here. This is the way it is. And over the course of maybe 5 or 6 years, I completely did a 180 and then started thinking, I love operating in the gray. And it's a similar time when I had that realization that I started getting introduced to coaching as well. And that's another huge light bulb or a real watershed moment for me, that I had some coaching with some challenges that I was facing. And I thought, wow, that was impressive. That was intense. It was amazing. I completely turned around from where I was. Wouldn't it be amazing if I were able to do that? And I was really, really fortunate that the business I worked for had an internal coaching proposition. They had openings, they were recruiting, they were looking to train new coaches. And I applied for it and I got taken onto this coaching program. So my day job was all about developing leaders and developing managers, albeit mainly in groups. And then I had this amazing sideline working with individuals to develop their potential, to develop their careers. I thought, this is amazing. You know, what is not to love about this? So, and I've been fortunate that I've gone from job to job. I've had secondments. I've survived restructures. I've been through all sorts of change, and I kept on coming out with a new role in L&D whilst having this this coaching role alongside. And really, that's where my corporate career took me. It got me so interested in developing talent, developing potential, working with people, wallowing in that grey, and really understanding how do we find a way forward when everything could be a little bit ambiguous. So hopefully that answers the question as to where I've come from and where I got to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the grey area absolutely is similar to me in terms of when I left. You know, to realise that there is, you know, there's not a set path, a set structure. When, you know, excuse me, when I was, you know, a store manager, it became very processy, and I realised that actually I'm not really a process man. I'm a bit of an authentic leader. I like to do things a bit of a, you know, on the ad hoc side. You know, maybe do things that felt right, not just the process. And I remember saying, I mean, age-old conversations, this used to happen in retail, like colleagues saying, no, that's not the process. We're not doing that. It's like, well, actually, what's the right thing to do? So I love that whole grey area. And obviously from that grey area, you've obviously built this authentic brand, which is fantastic. And the name Kellenva, which I think is a fantastic little, it's like a little mini Easter egg, isn't it? A lovely little special thing. Tell us what Kellenva, where the name came from.
Yeah, so Kellenva is actually a portmanteau or a joining of my children's names. So I have a beautiful little girl called Enva, and a beautiful little boy called Kellen, and we've brought them together to Kellenva, and it works from a alliteration point of view, Kellenva Coaching, so it's quite catchy. But yeah, it's lovely. It then, you know, once people work out how do they pronounce it, and you know, sometimes they get it wrong, sometimes they get it right, and that's cool. But once they've got it, it kind of sticks, hopefully, you know, Kellenva Coaching, KK, and yeah. So that's where it comes from. But yeah, a little Easter egg. I like the way you put that.
Brilliant. And obviously from launching this from obviously to the end of your career, what was that spark that made you say, you know what, I'm going out on my own, I'm launching my business, I want to now help people find their purpose? Where did that come from?
So it actually started probably, I don't know, it's got to be 2 to 3 years ago now, where I qualified as a coach. I was working with lots of different individuals around the business, and I was enjoying that work so much. And I thought, it's only ever going to be a sideline gig at the moment, and that's just not enough. I want to be doing this much more often. So I started formulating the idea of how would it be if rather than doing my sort of learning and development rather role full time with the bolt on, how would it be if I swapped those around, completely changed the dynamic where I was coaching much more often and maybe doing some learning content as a complementary thing? What might that look like? Is that ever going to happen in the organization I'm working in? I just don't think so. It's just not geared up for that. It's not willing to make that sort of in investment in full-time coaches, as it were. So that's where the idea was born from. But then also there's another element of this that throughout my learning career, and even throughout my management career as well, the fascination with people, that's really the common theme that runs through everything that I do, the fascination with people, whether it was people I know, people I was working with, whether it's people in the news, things that are going on in the world, where I really started wanting to know what's going on behind that, what's causing that behavior, what's causing that language, what's causing that thinking to be done. So if you combine that with a passion for coaching, that's where the idea was born. And to be honest, we were going through another restructure. They tended to come around fairly regularly, as they do tend to in business. And I kind of thought to myself, you toyed with the idea of setting out on your own last time you had a restructure and you didn't do it. And there's maybe a little bit of remorse there, thinking, oh, come on, Tom, you should have done that. But this time around, I thought, okay, here's the opportunity. Here's the opportunity to set up your own coaching business. Here's the opportunity to go back to university and study psychology and really formalize that learning, which you've been so passionate about, but only really learn on the job or anecdotally. Here's an opportunity to do something really, really big with it. So when the news came of this restructure, I thought, okay, this is my time to go. So I ended up taking voluntary redundancy, which gave me a way of leaving the business on the very best of terms. I got an incredibly generous redundancy package, which has given me the financial backing and also the time to set the business up and get the wheels in motion, but also take some time to head back to university and start studying again and really formalizing that learning. So it was a combination of factors, and it just felt this is the right time. You didn't do it 3 years ago and you kind of regretted that. Now's the time to do it. And that's kind of where we've got to, and that's where I am now.
Brilliant. And what was the belief like from leaving, because even in my own experience, I remember that feeling of what happens if this goes wrong? What happens if I fail? What belief did you have from leaving that you knew that this was the right thing to do?
So there's so many what ifs. And I think if you start wallowing in the answers of the what ifs, you might not actually get anywhere. And what it made me think of, Ricky, is a quote from a Ryan Reynolds film, Van Wilder.
Brilliant
and he
film,
says,
yes.
it's fantastic. And he says, worrying is a bit like a rocking chair. It can be a lot of fun, but it doesn't really get you anywhere. And I have that one up my sleeve, ready to go. No pun intended with you being a magician, but I have it up my sleeve, ready to go, because often, I do find myself indulging in worrying entirely too much about certain things, like what if I don't make a success? What if I, don't financially succeed, and all those sorts of things. And then I do have to think about me worrying about these things. It's not moving me forward. It's not moving me towards what it is I actually want to achieve. If I can put those worries to one side and think about, okay, let's flip them, let's reframe them. What happens if I do succeed? What happens if I do make a success out of this? If I can just change that way of thinking, reframe it slightly, and then that helps me get some clarity on, okay, so what are the actions I need to take? What are the behaviors I need to demonstrate in order to actually get what it is I want and succeed?
I love that. Yeah. And this often happens when I get guests on where it's like quote tennis. One of my favorite ones is, I think it's from Peter Pan. I saw it from an Instagram little thing from a school. And it's the Peter Pan phrase, which is, what if I fall? And then the response is, but what if you fly, darling? And it's like, wow, yeah. And there is that, isn't it? Like, what if today was going to be the best day of your life? What if today was going to be the best day that you earned the most money you've ever earned in your business? Or what if you used to meet your life partner or soulmate or whatever it might be? There's all those opportunities, isn't there? And it's about looking at that. But Tom, you're obviously now helping people identify their purpose. So you've moved from that. You had a fantastic opportunity, voluntary redundancy. You're now helping people in your business. And I think you mentioned earlier on, it's coming up to the year anniversary.
Yeah, in April. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, not far away.
Congratulations for that. So my question is, how do you define purpose?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. It's really difficult to understand what do we actually mean by purpose? Because it could be at one end of the spectrum something really transcendent, like the meaning of life, which if we're going to go down quote tennis is 42,
Yes.
as everybody knows.
Hitchhiker's Guide, yeah.
Yeah, so you could absolutely look at it from that point of view, and by looking at it from that point of view, you can think, well, how on earth am I ever meant to understand what my purpose is on earth? Some really huge questions that you could be asking yourself, and that's absolutely what some people do. And you look at the other end of the spectrum, and it could be as simple as, what is it I want to do within my career? Am I doing what makes me happy? And that could be it. And that word happy and fulfilled, those crop up for me often when I'm trying to define the purpose. So I don't think I can give you a definitive definition of the word purpose, but for me, it's about being happy and fulfilled in your life, knowing that you're in control of your own destiny, knowing that you're doing the things that you want to be doing, knowing that you are operating from cause rather than effect, that you are living life rather than experiencing life, I guess, or just existing, maybe.
I think it's a perfect answer. Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. So in line with this, you're now obviously using NLP in your practitioner. And obviously it's something that I discovered, probably I've always known about it, but you kind of had this kind of perception of what it was going to be. And now in hindsight, looking back, I've realized that actually a lot of the training we did was based on NLP. And I didn't realize it at the time because I didn't really have that awareness and that knowledge. But for anyone listening who's probably heard of it, they don't really know what it is. Tom, what is NLP?
So for me, I think NLP is it's just a means of understanding yourself and understanding other people better, with a view to be able to build great rapport, to be able to build relationships, to be able to communicate in a way where people just kind of get you. And what I mean by that is, an example might be where there's someone in the workplace perhaps that you just don't seem to see eye to eye with, or you just don't get on, or you're not speaking the same language. I can churn out so many different ways of putting that, but you just don't seem to get on. And if you were to spend some time understanding yourself, understanding how you like to communicate, what your preferences are, the conscious and the unconscious preferences that you have going on, and you also were in a position to find that out about the other person, and they became more self-aware of those unconscious and conscious processes. If you started to understand those and you started to be more open with them and share them, you'd probably find that you do have some common ground. There is some commonality there, and you probably could work in a more effective way, or build a better rapport, or just be more productive. So again, there's if you were to Google NLP, there'd be loads and loads of different definitions. But for me, it's about rapport, it's about communication, it's about understanding, it's about awareness, and it provides a framework in order to do that.
Definitely, yeah, and it's a massive. It's huge, isn't it? I mean, even in the foundation diploma that I'm currently studying, there's so many modules and so many different assessments, and there's so many so many acronyms, there's so many different languages in it. But I love that simple concept of what you just explained there, because it absolutely is. And I often think about, even just yesterday, I was at a wedding fair. Obviously, I was exhibiting with the wedding business. And even then, using the skills of NLP and all of my training to build rapport with people, in sales, or even in your business, it just comes naturally. But I didn't realize that for years and years and years, like one of the things that I shared before is I'm a huge fan of anchoring, and which we'll explain in a second. And I love how that has now helped me out in my own life and my career. But I used to think, I know you're a big avid fan of a band called Metallica. So people who can't see this, behind Tom, we'll put a picture of this somewhere on LinkedIn or Instagram. But there is a whole huge collection of Metallica vinyls behind Tom, which looks amazing. But yeah, for me, music as a memory, music can transport me back to a time, and I can remember exactly where I was. I can remember what I was feeling, maybe what I even smelled. But when I was younger, I didn't realize that was an anchoring technique. And now you can use that to obviously change your state, change your mood. And I talked about this recently on another podcast episode about taking responsibility, about choosing how you want to respond. And I'll share this with you, Tom. So recently I used an anchoring technique, and a classic one that my mentor taught me about, the elastic band, on the hand, to give you a bit of a stimulus. And last year I had a bit of anxiety, actually, which is really strange for me, because as a magician and as a performer, you would think that we are probably the most confident people in the world. And most of the time I am, but during this time, this was pre Alma, my daughter being born, there was a lots going on. There was this fear inside of, are we going to go into a winter lockdown? Are we going to, is my business going to shut down again because of lockdown 2020? That combined with being overly busy and just being burnt out, it wasn't a great concoction. And I started to get really anxious. And I remember turning up at events and just before I'm about to start, just completely like dripping all over my face. And I thought, what on earth is going on? And then at that point, when you're kind of nervous and you're sweating like that, you go, oh my God, I'm sweating. So then you sweat more and you just get panicky. And I remember saying to myself, like, what on earth is going on? I know how to do this. And I remember using the technique, and I started from that point where I'd use the elastic band to anchor myself into a state where I've done this before. I'd visualize it. I know I can do it. And I just would ping the elastic band to remind me of the point that so for example, if it was like a speaking gig, I would remember that moment of being right in the flow, right in the middle of it, having a great time and pinging it, and just, it would then calm me back down. And it's unreal, isn't it? That there are certain things that we can do that will control how we our state and how we feel. But I'm guessing that you explore this much further than I am, because I'm very much on that kind of foundation level. But tell us a little bit about the types of things that you use in your practice. So obviously anchoring, submodalities, I'm a big fan of that one as well. Tell us the sort of things that you kind of use or examples, without obviously going into too much personal information for people. But what sort of things are you using NLP for to help people?
Yeah. Okay. So there's kind of there's almost like two camps within NLP. I don't know, camps maybe not the right word, but two ways of utilizing it. So some of the things that you've mentioned there in terms of anchoring, in terms of using submodalities, there's lots of tools and techniques that you can use. So anchoring is a great example of a tool that you might choose to use with a client, where you're going to apply some sort of stimulus during the state which you've elicited. So you mentioned about being in the flow, or you might ask the client to elicit an experience when they felt super confident. So if confidence were the state they were looking for, and they wanted to feel really confident before, I don't know, they go into present to the board or something like that, by eliciting that state and then applying a stimulus, in your case the rubber band, I use touching of the knuckle. So applying a finger to the knuckle. By applying that stimulus at the peak of that state, they can then recall that state essentially anytime that they apply that stimulus. So for the listeners out there thinking, what's he talking about? If you talk about Pavlov's dogs, for example, classic sort of stimulus response, salivating dogs and bell ringing, that's the sort of thing we're talking about, stimulus response. So if you want to find out more, you could either Google anchoring, or you could Google Pavlov's dogs and find a little bit more out about that. But yeah, those are one of the tools that I use quite often, because if clients are saying, I wish I felt more confident going into present, or I wish I felt more chilled out before I go on stage, and those sorts of things, those are things that you can do, because I think stimulus response is so powerful. So I use that quite a lot. Submodalities is also so much fun to use and so powerful. So what we talk about when we say modalities and submodalities, we're talking about having a preference for seeing things, so being visual, or maybe auditory, so hearing them, which may appeal to some of your listeners if they're just tuning in, or it may be kinesthetic in terms of experiencing and feeling things, and we all have our own preference for each one of those, and it can be really useful to explore what goes on beneath those. So if you have someone who's a visual preference, and you ask them to, okay, I want you to bring about a picture which reminds you, or is informing you of being super confident, for example. Well, if that's the state we're trying to elicit, how can we make it even more compelling? How can we kind of dial up and dial down certain things? So for example, if you imagine that picture, is it more or less compelling if we dial the colors up to full saturation, or we make it black and white?
Love that.
Is it framed, or is it panoramic? What difference does that make? Is it actually a movie rather than just a still photo? So you can play around with all of these little things to either make something more compelling, if you're trying to install like a new compelling belief, or a new belief or something, or actually if you're working with a limiting belief which you're trying to diminish, you might dial those things down. So actually, is this picture less compelling if we make it in black and white? And that's a very, very basic overview of working with submodalities, but Very, very powerful tools that you can use just by playing around with some of the dials on a TV, for example. If you remember like an old CRT TV that had all the dials on the side, it's a little bit like playing around with the contrast, the brightness, the saturation, those sorts of things. So things like those, and there's so many others, are what I would call the tools and techniques. The other side of it is the language, and that's where I love operating. Is and these may be some things that you learn as you go through your journey. Is some of the linguistic techniques, some of the things you could be listening out for that pop up completely involuntarily in people's language, and really tuning into those, and then just offering an observation or offering a pondering. I notice you use the word can't really often. Tell me more about can't, or what can you do? So flipping it and offering what can you do, because, and funnily enough, I was writing about this on social media this morning, but so often when we're talking, we're kind of on autopilot because we're just having a conversation that sometimes words slip out, but they can be so telling about what's your mind state at the moment, what's your mental state at the moment, what's going on for you, how anxious do you feel at the moment, how relaxed do you feel at the moment, what's going on, and it can be so informative. And as a coach, as an NLP practitioner, you're kind of really listening out carefully for those. And it's not to catch people out, absolutely, it's not about that, but it is about it's interesting, we've talked about this before, and we've kind of come full circle, and we're back around to talking about this again. Or here's a common phrase that you use. I'm just intrigued to know where that phrase comes from. So there's loads and loads and loads of linguistic techniques which come normally when you're studying it at the master's level, and those are the techniques that I absolutely love weaving into my coaching. And because they are linguistic, you can just weave them in completely subtly as part of an ongoing conversation. It's not like you say, we're going to do a technique, I'm going to use a tool. It can just be something very, very conversational, and that's what I mean about building rapport, building that relationship just through having a really good, meaningful, purposeful conversation with somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I even remember it back in the old corporate days of talking to customers at the same level, building rapport, that kind of thing. And we used to make a laugh about this in one of the training sessions about how to build rapport with your customers, and and not to deliberately piss off a customer if you're mimicking them or mirroring like that. But it just helps, doesn't it? And you find that we used to use a great example, like if you'd go onto like a shop floor, for example, in my old corporate days, you would tell if someone was building rapport, and anybody could do this right now. If you go to a pub, a restaurant, if you go to Tesco's, or any supermarket's available, you often see this when two friends bump into each other over the trolleys in a supermarket. Oh, hey, Jill, how's it going? Oh, hi, John. Yeah, I'm great, thanks. And then about 5 minutes into the conversation, if you were to watch them, they're probably standing there both with their arms crossed, talking to each other, or their hands on their face. And you just think, wow, why are they copying each other? But it's not, it just happens naturally, isn't it? And I use this a lot when I'm trying to build rapport with people performing or even speaking, because you want to connect to that audience that they want to connect back to you. So if I'm going up to a group of strangers, I want to try and build rapport with them. Sometimes I do the classic thing where I put my hand on the hip and I've got my hand on a chair from like at the wedding breakfast. And I'm not doing it just to piss people off or mimic. It just naturally happens because I'm just kind of mirroring that language, but then that helps to open that conversation. So I absolutely love it. I think NLP is such a fantastic, wonderful model. I was telling my friend Paul, so shout out to Paul Dams. I was like, Paul, oh my God, this is amazing stuff. You need to look into this. But I do want to share one thing about this, and I'm going to ask in a second about maybe if there's an example you could share about how you may have helped someone go from a state to a new state using some of your expertise. But one of the things that I didn't realize at the time, back in the old training day, and shout out to the Difference Is You team. We were a team called The Difference Is You, which very similar to you. We were all about people, helping them to be the best version of themselves. And we had this great model from my boss, Matt Edwards. So shout out to Matt. He had this great concept of a tree. And the idea of the tree was that your roots below the ground was your beliefs and your values. So what you're programming yourself, what's important to you, how you kind of see the world, what's right and what's wrong. Then the trunk was kind of your choice. So you decide how to drive that behavior. And then the top of the tree, the leaves, was the beautiful leaves flourishing at its best. And, if you was to compare it to a tree that has, it's dying at the top, then it's linked to those roots and how you're nourishing in that, what's in the environment, how you're controlling your state. Are you feeding your beliefs and your values with the right ingredients, the water, the garden, that kind of thing? And then your choice. And we used to use a great example of like Usain Bolt, great example of coming out onto the field. And a lot of people, you know, even coming out going nervous, panicky, and he just comes out and does the classic, you know, and that's him choosing to drive that behavior. And what happens, it kind of makes everybody else feel a little bit nervous, but he's coming out, his beliefs and values, and what that is going to do is going to drive his behavior. But he makes that choice to say, do you know what? Yeah, I am nervous. I've not been to this stadium before, but you know what? I'm going to come out. I'm going to be my personality. I'm going to be the best version of myself. The crowd starts chanting his name. That makes him feel good. It makes probably the other runners feel really nervous. And what happens? He smashes it, or he did when he was obviously running. But it's that great example about making a choice from what's powering you. And I think that's a lot of especially over the 2 years, I would say, of even in my own journey, and a lot of people, I think a lot of this is about choice. What would you say about how beliefs and values can drive someone's behavior?
Yeah, hugely. I could talk for days on that particular subject, because values and beliefs is totally where I operate within my coaching business, and the work that I do. So I think values and beliefs are so ingrained in who you are, that you know they're imprinted at a really early age, and you get loads of influence from the people you grew up with, and your caregivers and your parents and grandparents and so on and so forth, and they are instilled in you at a really young age. But often they do sit at the unconscious level that we don't necessarily know what they all are. So, you know, you might say to somebody, you know, pop quiz, give me your top 5 values. And most people are like, I'm not sure. Whereas, and I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush. Other people may just be able to rattle them off really, really quickly. If they've done that work and they're totally convinced of them, they'll be able to rattle that off really, really quickly. But I find often, not always, but often they sit at the unconscious level. So a lot of the work that I would do is about eliciting what are those values, and whether it is values in life as a whole person, whether it is values within the context of career, or values within the context of family, or whatever role or hat you want to wear, you can elicit the values in there. And I find once you understand what your values are, what's truly important to you, and what the belief, I term them belief clusters that sit around each one of those values. What do you need to believe to be true in order for that value to actually be true for you, and that value to be important? If you understand that, then coming back to your point about the choices, you've got some point of reference to check in with. So I really, really like the tree analogy. I think trees are so fantastically versatile for these sorts of analogies and using them as metaphor. But if you think about the element of choice, I'm going to make a choice. If I have got something to check in with, like my beliefs and like my values, I will be able to get an inkling. Is this choice going to serve me well, or is it going to go against my values, for example? Yes. So if you know what your values are and you totally live by them, you totally align to them, when you're making those choices, they'll be there right in the foreground saying, okay, if you make this choice, this is the potential impact. It may be totally aligned to your values, and therefore it's going to be fantastically successful. It's going to be really good for you. It's going to be amazing. Or it may say, actually, this is going to grate against your values slightly. You might find yourself having to compromise your values. And that's when you get to the point of thinking, okay, well, is this a choice I want to make? Is this a decision I really want to make? What are the other options that I might have available to me here that are going to allow me to continue to be aligned to my values? But all of this does depend on whether you know what they are. Because if you don't have that reference point, if you're not clued up on your values, if you're not clued up on your beliefs, and you really know what they are, you may make decisions without that point of reference. That decision may not pan out quite the way you thought it would. It might be a bad decision, or an uninformed decision, and then you've got the outcome, and you're thinking, okay, that didn't go the way I thought it would, or that doesn't feel great, or it hasn't benefited me in the way that I thought it might. I wonder why that is. And you might not have many answers to that question. But if you are making decisions based on your values, based on your beliefs, based on those things that are important to you, you've just got that much more information to go on, and therefore in a position to make more informed decisions. And take it from me, you're not always going to make the right one. You may end up feeling like, that wasn't great, that doesn't feel great, and that feeling of not feeling great having made a bad decision is because you're thinking perhaps it hasn't aligned to my values. So that for me is the benefit of understanding your values, understanding your beliefs, and then thinking about how do I live my life aligned to those.
So, Tom, using NLP then, is there an example that you could share with us about, obviously without going into, personal information or details about someone, but is there an example, or maybe an example when you did your training, of someone coming in to with you as a coachee, and helping them moving from one state or some sort of issue or some sort of thing that they're going through that they want to change or improve, and how have you used some of the tools in NLP to get them from where they are now to that desired state? And also to shout this out to people who aren't really clear up with this. I know that a lot of this is glorified, and obviously we've seen it from Tony Robbins. A lot of the stuff that Tony Robbins is NLP, which I didn't really realize, all those years ago. And I'm seeing him shouting at people and telling them to break up with their friends and family, like pattern changes. Wow, I realize now what he's doing. But is there an example that you could share of how you've used NLP to help someone get to a desired state?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've talked about anchoring, and we've talked about submodalities, and you can use both of those for changing states. So if on a minor state change, for example, so if somebody comes to coaching and they're talking about, I find myself procrastinating a lot, and I find myself not making decisions, not making actions, and I will find anything else other to do than actually do the thing that I know I should be doing. So classic procrastination, it shows up in a number of different ways. It can be incredibly debilitating for some people, where they've kind of got that analysis paralysis or decision fatigue, that sort of thing. For other people, it's much more of an annoyance than anything too debilitating. So it's a spectrum. But you can use collapsing anchors, for example, where where you are actually removing or collapsing the stimulus response that comes along with the state of procrastination, and then replacing it with something like motivation, for example. So, and I won't go into the details of how you do it, but it's essentially collapsing one, so there's no longer a stimulus or no longer a state, and then you build up another one and you anchor the new state that you want, i.e. motivation or whatever word it may be. So anytime that you do feel, actually, I'm getting into a procrastinating state here, actually, I've got my anchor of motivation. I'm just going to tap that. I'm going to ping that band that you talked about. I'm going to change my state by applying a stimulus, and that that's a simple example about how anchoring could be used to change what I would deem a kind of a minor state procrastination. You go to the other end of the spectrum, and perhaps moving away from states, but maybe moving into limiting beliefs. They're really prevalent. I have them. A lot of people do have those limiting beliefs, and you certainly can use some of the techniques of NLP to help somebody create a new empowering belief. So submodality work, for example, there's a lovely belief change switch that you can do where you elicit the submodalities, or you elicit the state of the limiting belief, and over a course of a few steps, you replace it with a new empowering belief. And a couple of stepping stones along the way are eliciting a belief which is no longer true, and you're essentially mapping that onto the limiting belief to suggest to your client that limiting belief is no longer true, and it's as untrue as any belief that you have that is no longer true. And then you also have a further stepping stone where you elicit the state of something that is fundamentally true. So, for example, like the sun comes up every morning. It's a fundamental truism certainly in my world. Not everyone may believe that one. But I imagine most people would say yes, that the sun comes up in the morning. That is a universal belief, a universal truism, and you map that over onto the new empowering belief. So that new empowering belief is as universally true as the sun coming up. So over the process, over the course of a session, or maybe over a couple of sessions, you're essentially relegating the limiting belief to the annals of time with the old beliefs that are no longer true, and you replace them with this universal belief. That's part of the work for limiting beliefs. That's just one of the NLP techniques that you could use to do some of that work, and then embedding that new belief, looking for the evidence that backs up that new belief. That comes over a period of time, and it's not just something you can snap your fingers in 60 minutes and it's done. It's obviously the process will take a longer period, but that's just kind of like the starting technique that you might use for limiting beliefs, amongst many others. There are definitely a lot of other ways that you could apply both coaching and NLP to limiting beliefs, but that would be one.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny actually, because you've made me think about one of the things that I've done recently about moving myself into a state. I have this weird thing about sunglasses. If I'm in the car, as soon as I put my sunglasses on, I don't know if it's because there's this notoriousness about it, notoriety, but as soon as I put the sunglasses on and I'll whack a playlist on, I can kind of get into like that flow state, and I've anchored myself into it. So I think the next time, probably if I ever do like a gig or a talk, maybe on a stage, I think I'm going to take my sunglasses with me, put that playlist on my headphones, and then that's what, instead of me jumping like Tony Robbins on a trampoline before he jumps on the stage, that's what I'll be doing. So, but one of the things I was funny about, which is quite relative, is that I was reading a lot of studies about obviously fear and a lot of work on the success principles by Jack Canfield. And he talks about fear and about how when you are born, you're only ever born with two fears, the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling over, which tells you that everything is then learned, which means you can unlearn it. So even now, as I've got at this point in the recording, she's just 10 weeks old. So now I'm thinking about everything that she's now going to learn and, condition, how me and Danielle bring her up, how the things that I teach her and will then shape her beliefs in the future. So it's quite scary. I'm like, oh my God, that's quite a lot of pressure. When I think about my own life and my own limiting beliefs of I can do this or I can't do that, or no, that doesn't make sense. I don't believe that. I can't do that. I'm now really thinking, well, bloody hell, how her life will turn out, not solely on my own fault, but there is that responsibility now where I'm thinking, I want to do the right thing. And I want to make sure that she's going to get some good beliefs and get some good values embedded inside of her to then have a great life. So so I'm really glad actually that NLP's opened my eyes. But Tom, as we come to the end of the podcast, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. If people want to learn more about you, what you're doing, or even they want to discover more, or even they might want to even contact you to say, do you know what, this has really resonated with me actually, and there's something in my mind I'd love to kind of have a chat with you about, how can they find out more about what you do?
So there's two easy ways. I would say the website will give you a flavour of who I am and what I do and the services that I offer. So if that's the sort of information you're looking for, then the website is where I direct you. So it's www.kellenva.com. Maybe Ricky's be kind enough to put it in the show notes.
I'll put in the show notes.
You can get the spelling right on that one. So that will give you a good idea, because the way I've designed that website, I wanted it to be an extension of me. So it's just a virtual version of me essentially. So you should get a pretty good idea. You'll see me, you'll see my picture, you'll see my family in there, and that's the way I've designed the website. So that's one direction. If you want to hear a little bit more though about what I've got to say or what I think on certain subjects, then maybe checking me out on LinkedIn is the other way, because that's my main social media channel. That's where you'll see the content that I create, the videos that I make, adverts for workshops that I run, free resources, all of that sits within my LinkedIn profile. So you'll be able to find me. Again, it will be in the show notes, but it's Tom White's Master NLP Coach. That's how you might search for me. Look out for the beard and white glasses. That tends to be how most people find me if they haven't quite worked out if they've got the right person just from the name, because it's a fairly generic name. But white glasses and big beard, you'll track me down. But like I say, those are probably the two main avenues I direct people towards if they want to find out some more.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tom hasn't paid me to say this. He doesn't know I was going to say this, but I have recently been on one of his workshops and it was amazing. So yeah, Tom, shout out to you. And his LinkedIn post as well are very thought-provoking. So yeah, Tom, thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and good luck to you and the business. And happy anniversary for April. Yeah, for the 1 year. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you ever so much for having me along with you. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and hopefully it's of some value and entertainment for your listeners.
Thank you, Tom, for sharing your story and giving a really great insight into NLP. Now, don't forget, you can head to the link in the description and you can download a copy of Tom's free workbook, Explore Your Purpose in 7 Steps. Just head to the link in the description and download today. Thanks for listening to this episode, and as always, a huge thank you to the patrons of this podcast. Thank you, Anthony Howe, Sarah Kay, Chloe Wilmot, Jasmine Barnes, Sherry Brenton, Steve McDermott, Chris Lovett, and Rory Barnes for your continued support. It means the world, and it gets this podcast out every single week. But for now, good luck unlocking the best version of yourself, and I'll join you for another episode of the Unlock Podcast next Wednesday. Goodbye.